Well, greetings everyone from Cooperstown, New York, site of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. We're very glad you could join us on this spring day from Cooperstown as we continue our virtual Voices of the Game series. We're going to be talking to a good friend and a great baseball expert and historian, Marty Appel. We'll talk to Marty momentarily, but before we officially welcome Marty to the program, we do want to take a moment to go over the news that came out yesterday. Very exciting news regarding our Hall of Fame induction. As you may be aware, our induction was originally scheduled to take place that last weekend in July, Sunday, July 25th, and it was scheduled to be a private televised event. That is no longer occurring. We announced yesterday that our 2021 induction ceremony will be shifting to Wednesday, September 8th, and it will be an outdoor ticketed event with limited crowds. Jane Forbes Clark, chairman of the Baseball Hall of Fame, made the announcement yesterday about our induction ceremony. It'll start 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, September 8th, again in front of limited crowds, outdoor ticketed events, and as always, it'll be on the grounds of the Clark Sports Center. The ceremony will be broadcast live exclusively on the MLB Network. The ceremony will honor the members of the class of 2020, Derek Jeter, Marvin Miller, Ted Simmons, and Larry Walker. No candidates were elected for induction in 2021. Now, the lawn seating at the induction ceremony will be free, but unlike past years when seating was open, tickets will be required for the September 8th event, beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday, July 12th. Again, it's July 12th. A limited number of tickets will be made available to fans exclusively at our website. Go to baseballhall.org/HOF2021. I'll say that one more time. baseballhall.org/HOF2021. And at this time, seating areas will be designated for vaccinated and unvaccinated ticket holders. Also, the Hall of Fame annual awards presentation is going to remain an indoor TV event only, and that is going to take place Saturday, July 24th. The award winners will be invited back to Cooperstown to be recognized at the induction ceremony as well, but their presentation will be July 24th. We're going to be honoring a bunch of people because we have last year's winners of the Writing and Broadcasting Awards, and we have this year's winners. So we've got Al Michaels, Ken Harrelson, Dick Cagle, the late Nick Cafardo, and also our 2020 Buck O'Neill Lifetime Achievement Award winner, David Montgomery. So we're very excited. Our induction ceremony will be outdoors, ticketed event, September 8th, 2021. All right, we want to also thank the Ford Motor Company for making this and other programs available. Marty Appel is one of the game's leading authors and historians. He has written 24 books total, including Pinstripe Empire, the New York Yankees, from before the Babe to after the Boss. He's a two-time winner of the Casey Award given to the best baseball book of the year. Worked for many years in public relations for the Yankees, served in the commissioner's office, and has also worked for the Topps Company. He won an Emmy for his work on Yankee broadcasts on WPIX, and has also served as a consultant to the great film 61 and the TV series, very entertaining, The Bronx is Burning from 2007. Marty, how are you doing? Good to hear from you. How are you?
Bruce, always great to be with you. I think this is like the third or fourth time we've done a program, although the first one virtually. And I love the opportunity to talk to you. And I love everything about the Baseball Hall of Fame. In fact, I keep on my desk the first souvenir I ever got in Cooperstown. I got this at the Hall of Fame gift shop in 1962 when I was 14. And it still sits on my desk, along with my first baseball card, Billy Hunter of the St. Louis Browns, 1953. And Billy turned 93 last week. So wanted to mention that.
Oh, that's terrific. I have to ask you about that baseball. Does it have the old Hall of Fame logo on it?
It has no logo.
No logo.
This was before people thought of licensing and logos and branding. It's down and dirty. It probably holds enough coins to buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks once it gets full. But that's about it.
Very nice. Very nice. Let's talk about another collection that you have. This is a wonderful photograph of all the baseball books that you have written over the course of your career, and these are all leather bound. This is a beautiful collection here.
Thank you.
I don't want to ask how expensive it was putting the leather binding on all these books, but I love this idea. This is great.
It was inspired by my friend, the late Maury Allen, who wrote a lot of books and always treated himself to a leather-bound edition. So I thought that was kind of cool, and I followed in Maury's footpath and started doing it myself. And yes, it is expensive.
Now, I read somewhere, I don't know if it was at your website or another place, that you have a personal library of over 2,000 baseball books. Is that true?
That is true, and I keep in a special place, which is actually right behind me if you didn't see my virtual background here, all pre-1960 books. They're sort of special for being vintage. And a special little corner of that bookcase are baseball novels that were given to me by Larry Ritter, the author of Glory of Their Times. He was a friend, and his childhood novels, which are now over 100 years old, occupy a special little place in that bookcase.
These books have to completely overtake one of the rooms in your home, right?
According to my wife, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do about that in the coming years.
You mentioned the background. You should tell folks about that because it does have a connection to the Yankees and spring training.
This is a virtual background, but I took the photograph, and it's Huggins Stengel Field in St. Petersburg, formerly Miller Huggins Field or Stadium, I think. It's recognizable by the trees in the background, which are Austrian or Australian pines. I never remember. And those same trees are visible in early spring training photos because the Yankees began training in this ballpark in 1925. Height of Murderers Row, Ruth and Gehrig and Combs and Hoyt and Shalky, and they trained there on until they moved to Fort Lauderdale in 1962, and then that was the year the Mets were born, and the Mets took over this ballpark. So it's got a great history to it. And on YouTube, you can see a lot of spring training videos with the players running out of the clubhouse onto this field. So I thought it was a pretty cool background.
Marty, do you remember when that ballpark was torn down?
It's still there. I took this
picture.
It's
still there?
Yeah, I took this picture just about 6 or 7 years ago. And
Wow.
It's still used by St. Petersburg high schools and amateur leagues, and it's still maintained beautifully.
Still under the same name, or have they renamed it?
No, it's Huggins Stengel Field.
Oh, that's amazing. 1925, so almost 100 years old.
Right.
Let's talk about you. You're far under 100 as I try to make that awkward transition. You were telling me that you grew up in Brooklyn, but you were a Yankee fan, or you became a Yankee fan, and the guy that you really gravitated toward was a very good player, but not one of the superstars of the team. Bobby Richardson really became your guy growing up in the 1950s. What was it about Richardson that made you a fan of him?
Well, I loved Mickey Mantle just as everybody else did, but I wanted my own guy. I didn't want to share Mickey with the rest of the universe. So because I was a little second baseman in Little League and I happened to wear number 1 on my back, I was attracted to Bobby. And in 1959, Sport Magazine ran a little column of fan clubs you can join with the addresses. So I saw Bobby Richardson, I joined his fan club, and he took a real interest in the fan clubs. He got to know everybody who was in it. We'd get little religious tracts in the mail and personal letters even. In '62, I won a contest with the fan club to guess which game he would get his 100th hit. And of course, I nailed it exactly. So I was already a prodigy when it came to that stuff. Anyway, when I went to work for the Yankees in '68, he'd already been retired a couple of years, But I dropped him another letter and I said, guess what? It's me from your fan club. And now I'm Bob Fishel's assistant in the public relations department. And to his credit, he's a wonderful guy. We reformed the friendship this time as adults. And it goes on to this day. We spoke last week. We talk a lot. And one special day a year, the day after the World Series, we have a ritual phone call. I call him and we celebrate that his 12 RBIs in one World Series, which he did in 1960, still stands as the record. It's amazing that it's lasted that long. So we have a celebratory toast. I'm sure he has orange juice, and we celebrate, that his record still goes on.
Now, Bobby's a minister still, right?
Yeah, a lay minister.
Lay minister. He and Tony Kubek were given a nickname. I've never heard Bobby Richardson talk about this, but I've heard Tony Kubek talk about it. And he didn't really like the nickname. He and Richardson were called the Milkshake Twins because they were, the two guys on the team that didn't go out, didn't drink. They really led exemplary lives at all times, if you will. Did you ever talk to Bobby about that nickname, what he felt about it?
Yeah, he doesn't get offended by it or upset by it because it was probably pretty accurate. It kind of grew from George Weiss, the general manager of the team, once dispatched detectives to follow the Yankees at night to make sure they were not up to no good. And they followed Richardson and Kubek to the local Y where they played ping pong. So the story got out and they became the Milkshake Kids. But it doesn't bother Bobby. None of that stuff bothers Bobby. And he gets along so well with everybody on the team, from saints to sinners to, the law-abiding throng among them. And he and Mickey Mantle were wonderful friends. Mickey wasn't exactly an altar boy, but they had a wonderful friendship.
Most of our viewers, probably safe to say, never had a chance to see Bobby Richardson play. Obviously, you did. He was a great defensive second baseman, really adept at turning the double play.
Well, he was, but one of the funny things we said last week was that baseball has become a game of home runs, walks, and strikeouts. And Bobby said, there wouldn't be a place for me in the game today. I didn't do any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, the appreciation would definitely have to come on the defensive side of the ball, where there are new statistics to try to better gauge players defensively. But Richardson was a standout for many years until I think it was back problems that ended his career, if I'm not mistaken.
He just, Kubek had retired the year before. The Yankees had said to him, please don't both quit at the same time. That would be some burden for us to replace you both. So he agreed to play one more year, but he was anxious to just go home and literally be with his growing family and spend more time with his kids. He and Betsy now have 39 descendants between children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and none of them got COVID.
Good.
Very
now
good.
that I think of it, it was Tony that had the back problems.
Yes.
Richardson could have kept playing, but he felt it was the right time to move on.
Yeah. And another thing we talked about last week, we were talking about the game today and all the overshifting, and we talked about his most famous catch, which was snaring Willie McCovey's line drive, which ended Game 7 of the '62 World Series and gave the Yankees a 1-0 win and a world championship. And we kind of recreated it on the phone and agreed that the ball was hit so hard and was rising that if they had overshifted and he was playing in short right field, as he might today, he still would have caught the ball. It would have been right at him.
Really? Interesting. Let's talk about your first job with the Yankees. It's the late 60s. You joined the organization with a very specific job, answering fan mail for this gentleman.
People wrote a lot of fan letters in those days. Mickey was in his 18th year, well, his 17th year when I started. And he was no longer taking home his fan mail at night to work until the wee hours of the morning responding. So it was not being answered. And Bob Fishel, the PR director of the team, knew that that was leaving a lot of unhappy fans. They wanted something. So while he was thinking that, my letter, written from State University College at Oneonta near Cooperstown, arrived looking for a summer job. My good fortune was that in the late 60s, there were not a lot of college students looking for summer jobs in baseball. It was not a cool sport at the time. Joe Namath was attracting a lot of people to football. Walt Frazier to basketball. Those were the cooler sports in that period. So I'm the only letter, and there's those boxes of fan mail. And Bob Fishel invites me in for an interview. A thrill just to go to Yankee Stadium, to the inner workings, to the offices. The interview went well, and he hired me to catch up with all that unanswered fan mail. So I would always save 3 or 4, of course, that I had to go over with Mickey in person. So I have some genuine time with him. And he was wise to my ways, but a friendship built out of that. And we kept in touch until his passing in 1995.
First time you met Mickey after taking the job, was it nerve-wracking for you?
Oh, was it ever? I mean, I'm in the Yankee clubhouse. I'm looking around at Frank Crosetti and Jim Turner and Ralph Houck and all of these guys. And then out of the shower, here comes Mickey. And my God, my baseball cards have come to life. So it was such a thrill. But he put everybody at ease. He had a way about him. When we would get a new player on the club, like up from the minors or somebody from the National League, Mickey would walk over to him in the clubhouse and extend his hand and just say, "Hi, I'm Mick," as though they didn't know.
Yeah.
And it just broke the tension or, whatever was going on at the time. And he made it clear that you're a full teammate now and let's go out to dinner tonight or something like that. So that was one of the ways in which he was indeed a great teammate.
Yeah, I've always heard that he was absolutely beloved by the other players.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's that resentment toward a superstar because maybe he's given special treatment, maybe he's got a big ego, but that never happened with Mantle, according to everybody I've talked to that had any association with him.
He had a way of relaxing the image of the all-American boy, which I guess he wasn't, but he could make fun of himself. If you recall, the first player to wear an earring was Barry Bonds when he was still with the Pirates, had a dangling earring here. And one Old Timers Day, which I had a big hand in doing all the arrangements every year, Mickey showed up wearing an earring because he knew that would be so un-Mickey Mantle. And he played into that. He was great like that, but he didn't go on the field with the earring.
You mentioned that you did remain friends with him up until his death in the mid-1990s. Toward the end, he did some public interviews after he developed cancer, and he talked about how he regretted some of the things he had done earlier. If he had known that he might, live longer, he might have treated his body a little bit better. He came from a family where many of the men had died very young, and he outlived many of them. Did you guys talk about that at all?
Not really. He came from a culture, he was born in Dust Bowl, Oklahoma in the 30s during the Great Depression. And it was kind of the culture of the community that everybody drank. So nobody looked at it as like, you shouldn't do this. Ultimately, it'll catch up with you. And of course, with him, it did. And that was really unfortunate. I don't like when I see on Facebook, somebody will put a picture of Mickey up and then there'll be comments about, I bet he was drunk when he took this picture. Mickey was a wonderful guy. And we ought to have a little more respect for first, alcoholism being an illness, not something you joke about. And furthermore, it so overrode that what a wonderful guy he was to be around and how good he was to all his teammates and everybody that he connected with within the baseball community.
There's a story I like to tell people. I was born in '65, and I don't really have any memories of seeing Mickey Mantle play. His last season was '68. I was all of 3. But my family for years has told me that I would, at the age of 3, during that final season, I don't know if I was still in a crib or what, but I would get up out of the crib or off the ground when I heard the television announcer say that Mickey Mantle was coming to bat. And apparently I would just start jumping up and down hysterically because it was Mickey Mantle. Somebody had told me that it was Mantle. There was something special. I have no memories of this, but it's what more than one of my family members tell me. So it must be true all these years later.
Bruce, that very year you were born, 1965, there was a Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium. There were 2 ultimately, but that was the first. He was still an active player. So after all the ceremonies on the field, which included Bobby Kennedy, Joe DiMaggio, many, many other notables. So now the game begins. It's the Yankees against Detroit. Mickey comes to bat in the first inning, and Joe Sparma is pitching for Detroit. And I'm watching on TV. I wasn't there. But as Mickey takes his place in the batter's box, Joe Sparma walks down from the mound to shake Mickey Mantle's hand, just to congratulate him on his day and what an honor it was to pitch to him and play in the same game with him. And that was the respect that was universal. Everybody in the game loved Mickey Mantle like that. I'll give you a statistic. I don't know if it directly speaks to that. In 18 years as a major leaguer, Mickey was hit by a pitch 18 times. That's remarkable, an average of once a year, because people respected how bad his legs were and they didn't want to do anything to hurt Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
What a statement.
Yeah. You think about players today, we see players on opposing teams shake hands, acknowledge each other all the time. Back in the 1960s, that was unheard of. So for Sparma to do that really does say a lot.
Yeah.
Now, you joined the Yankees. Your boss was legendary PR director Bob Fishel. And then the other member of the PR department was Bill Guilfoyle, the man shown here. So that's Marty on the left, Bill on the right. This picture was taken a few years later. Bill, after working in the Yankee front office, then moved on to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he became their director of public relations. He was there when Roberto Clemente and Willie Stargell were there. And then from there, he joined the Hall of Fame, and he headed up our PR department, and he became a very high-ranking executive here up until his retirement, which I think was back around 1997. So Bill Guilfoyle is the name that we know here in Cooperstown, just like people in those organizations, Yankees and Pirates, know about him. Tell us a little bit about working with a guy like Bill. I mean, I know about Bill because I worked with him at least indirectly in a different department here. Bill actually helped me get my first job here at the Hall of Fame. But a lot of people probably don't know the name Bill Guilfoyle, don't know what kind of a guy he was. Tell us about him.
An exemplary guy. Baseball was lucky to have somebody like him in its midst, and kind of a mentor to me almost from the day I joined the Yankee office. He helped me fill out my tax forms and how many dependents. I remember he was doing that. And then long before computers were analyzing the stats, he had ideas on things we should include in the Yankees annual press guide, such as he and I launched a project together showing the top 20 Yankees in each batting and pitching category. So that's pretty easy to compile today, but that page is still in the Yankee Media Guide today. And every time I look at it, I think of working on it on long yellow legal pad with Bill Guilfoyle. What a joy that was. They were already working on the first baseball encyclopedia that Macmillan published in 1969. And we knew they had been compiling those kind of stats that would make things available. But hard as it is to believe, for guys who had split seasons with 2 different teams, what they did with each team was not readily available.
Hmm.
So to get somebody's true lifetime total, we needed to find out how many of those did he have with the Yankees. And Bill and I tapped into that database and we were able to get that. So it appeared in the 1970 press guide, and I still look at that page today with pride.
Of course, no computerization back then at the office, no internet. The Sporting News was the publication that provided statistics to the general public, but even those arrived only on a weekly basis and were maybe 3 or 4 days out of date. So I guess you guys, you and Bill and Bob Fishel had to rely on help from major league offices, right? As far as getting statistics, getting information that was as up to date as possible at the time.
I'm smiling because I'm remembering they would only publish fielding statistics once a month in the Sporting News. So the monthly issue came with the fielding statistics, and I said, I'll pull a few of these out and where the Yankees are involved and put them in our daily press notes. So I had in there assists by catchers. And it was, at that time, it was like Fisk 57, Munson 54. I put it in there, but okay. Well, Thurman saw it in the clubhouse and went crazy at me. It's like, what are you embarrassing me for? What are you putting that in there for? And I said, it's a silly statistic. It's how many opportunities do you have to throw out a runner? If they're not going to run on your arm, you're not going to get that many statistics. And he's still grumbling. He's still angry that I did that, which I still think I was right. And anyway, here comes the game, and he drops three strike threes and throws to first base to get the guy out. And each time he did it, he pointed to me in the press box. So that was Thurman having fun with me and running up his assist total.
Yeah. And of course, you and him would remain friends. You'd work on a book together. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Another one of the great players from the Yankees in the 70s, of course, was Bobby Mercer. You sent me this great photograph. This is from 1971, Yankee Stadium. You and Bobby are giving a close look to a bat. What's going on here?
I don't remember exactly what was going on, but for people who remember Bobby, he used to tape the bat down near the handle. You can see the tape there. I think it was because he had a bone bruise or something like that in his fingers, and it helped with padding. So we were probably talking about that or something. And Michael Grossford, our photographer, just happened to capture the picture. But Munson and Mercer, to the generation that followed Mickey Mantle fans, were the guys. And today there's still such great affection for the two of them, who we lost both of them at much too young an age.
Tell us what Bobby was like. Player at the time, you're the public relations official. You have to work with the players on a daily basis. We got to know Bobby pretty well as a broadcaster in terms of his personality, but how was he on an up close and personal basis?
He was a delight. He was wonderful to work with. And he was, I would say he was the most popular Yankee in the post Mickey Mantle years. He had the largest fan base, and he was great with the fans, responsive to them, signed a lot of autographs before the game, walking over to the sideline. And then in his later years, became very active with the BAT charity, baseball assistance team, where he would go around to all the spring training camps and talk to the players to try and persuade them to have money deducted from their paychecks to go to this charity that helped people in the baseball family who were in need. So Bobby was a wonderful guy. His wife, Kay, is as good as it comes. So miss them both a great deal.
Did you stay pretty close to Bobby right till the end?
Yeah, because I was on the BAT board of directors that planned the annual dinner. And we talked all the time. And then, how silly of me to forget, I was his boss. I was the executive producer of the Yankee telecast for WPIX. and I brought Bobby into the broadcast booth.
Hmm.
He had done it earlier, but then he didn't do it for a few years. We lost Bill White to the National League presidency. We needed to restructure the broadcast team, and I brought Bobby back, and he was so happy to be back, and that kind of cemented our friendship forever.
I remember hearing him on so many of those Yankee broadcasts, so down to earth, so willing to poke fun at himself. Of course, he struggled with cancer those last couple of years, but publicly just handle it with such grace. I guess he knew that the end was coming and that there was not much that could be done about it, but just handled it in kind of a typical, classy Mercer type way.
Bruce, he was so brave in those final months. He was riddled with cancer and it caused him great pain. And the last thing you need is shingles, and he developed shingles.
Mm.
This is at the time that his autobiography came out, and the publisher had lined up a lot of signings and appearances to help push the book. Bobby should have been home in Oklahoma dealing with the pain and the suffering he was going through, but he made every one of those commitments, including the very last day on his itinerary. He went out to the Yogi Berra Museum in Little Ferry, New Jersey, talked, signed autographs. I was there. He was sitting there in such pain from the cancer and the shingles. And then he flew home that night and he died like 5 days later. So the fact that he just met all his obligations like that was so noble. Love that guy.
Yeah, amazing. Another photograph from around this time period, early 1970s, after the 73 season, the Yankees moved to their temporary home at Shea Stadium. While this was being done to Yankee Stadium, and that's you in the leather coat and the hard hat. Great photograph here.
Yeah, this was obviously like halfway through the demolition and construction project. So it's a cool photo because you can see the old stadium with the pillars and the poles. The mezzanine and the lower deck are still there, but the upper deck and the lighting system and the roof have now been redone for the new stadium. So it was being done from the top down. And we did a press tour there one day, and this picture was taken, and I love this picture because it shows the old and the new before we moved back into the refurbished stadium.
Another great old photograph that takes on some historical significance is this one. It's a photo from, I guess, late November 1973. There you are on the left. You're looking much different here than in the late 60s.
Or today.
And your style of clothing has also changed to conform to the mod way of dressing back then. In the middle is Bob Fishel, and on the right, Dick Williams, who on this very day was introduced to the press as the new Yankee manager. He was supposed to be the manager opening day 1974. That, of course, never happened. Tell us about this day.
Well, we thought we pulled off quite a coup hiring Dick Williams, who had just gone to the World Series with the Oakland A's. And he was like the most famous manager at the time. So Ralph Houck had resigned after the 73 season. We hired Dick Williams. We had a lavish press conference at Terrace in the Park restaurant near Shea Stadium at Flushing Meadow Park. And it was great. And I remember going to Gabe Paul, our general manager, and with the menu, what are we going to serve all the writers? We're on first class. This is Dick Williams. So I said, well, how about a shrimp bowl? They're $1 a piece. So if we had like 100 shrimp, that's going to be $100. He said, you go for it. So we went for it. We had the big shrimp bowl. And then not long after, the contract is voided because Charlie Finley claimed he still had the rights to Dick Williams, which he did. And if we wanted him, we'd have to give up a couple of players to get him, which we wouldn't do. So we wound up hiring the wonderful guy, Bill Verdin, who just turned 90. Yesterday, was it, Bruce? I think it was yesterday.
Yes, it was yesterday. Yeah.
No, Bill Verdin was the manager, but trust me, we didn't have a shrimp bowl when we had our press conference for Bill Verdin. We
Yeah.
weren't going to do that twice. And then I'll say in the middle of the picture is my mentor who hired me, Bob Fishel, 20 years with the Yankees. Then before that, the Browns. And after that, the American League. And I think still considered the best publicist that baseball ever had. There's an award named for him every year now, the Bob Fishel Award. And that coat, Gene Michael talked me into buying. It was a bad purchase, but he bought one just like it. So
Yeah. Might look better on Gene on the stick than you. I don't know. It just,
I don't think it looked good on either of us.
no, it did not. You mentioned about Dick Williams and the fact that his contract with the Yankees was voided. He had resigned after the 1973 World Series. He was furious with Finley for embarrassing and then removing Mike Andrews from the active World Series roster. So even though the A's won the World Series, he basically resigned right after Game 7. And because he resigned, technically he was still under contract, and Finley was able to claim that he had the rights to him. I heard a report, maybe I read this somewhere, that Finley asked for compensation and that one of the compensation requests he made was actually for Bobby Mercer. I don't know if that's true.
No, to me, it was always Otto Velez and Scott McGregor.
Okay.
And Gabe Paul said, that's never going to happen. There are crown jewels. So
Yeah.
it didn't quite work out that way, but that was the Dick Williams saga. I should mention also, for people wondering, this is in the runway at Shea Stadium behind home plate that led to home plate. You always saw that opening there on the center field camera shots. So that's where this picture was taken.
Now, here's a signing that did work out and did remain more permanent. November 9th, 1976, the Yankees introduced Reggie Jackson at this press conference, having just signed him to a 5-year contract. He was one of the prizes of that first free agent season. What do you remember about putting that press conference together?
I remember Reggie was his own PR guy. He knew everybody in the press, including in New York. And he took charge of the whole press conference. He called people by name when it was their turn to ask a question. So he was going to be a big star that I had never dealt with before, but he was a magnetic figure. You were just drawn to Reggie Jackson because he was Reggie Jackson. This particular moment where we're at the old Americana Hotel for that press conference was recreated in the Bronx is Burning miniseries. And I was a advising producer for the series. And they asked me if I wanted to play myself 30 years earlier. So they dressed me up kind of like that. I sat at the dais during the press conference, and it was a rare experience of playing yourself 30 years younger.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a special moment.
Well, we have that photo. We'll actually show that a little bit later on.
All right.
Here's another great photo. You mentioned Bill Verdin taking over when Dick Williams could not. So here we have a photograph of you on the left with 3 of the most recent Yankee managers at that point in time. You've got the major, Ralph Houck, on the left, Bill Verdin in the middle, and then, of course, Billy Martin on the right. How'd you and Billy get along? Billy was a terrific manager, always seemed to be 2 or 3 innings ahead of everybody else. But as we know, had his difficult moments. As a PR person, having a manager like Billy Martin, what was that like?
I was a little intimidated by Billy, to be honest with you, because you never knew what mood he was going to be in when you walked into his office, and you never knew what gesture he might have been making as you were walking out. So it was a tenuous relationship with Billy, although there were flights where I sat with him on the plane and we had talks about the Yankees of the 50s and all those great Casey Stengel teams. So I had my very good moments with Billy as well. When he was first hired in August of 75, when we were still at Shea, we had a long conversation. He wanted to go over everybody who covered the team and who smoked cigars so he could give him a cigar. I mean, he was very into the whole dynamic of the whole relationship there. Um, Ralph Houck, I wanted to mention because you mentioned he was nicknamed the Major, and he was a major in the Army. And it occurred to me not that long ago, I wonder if any baseball player ever held a higher rank. And I did some research, and he was the highest ranking baseball player ever in the military by having achieved being a major. And he was a leader. Boy, everybody respected and loved Ralph Houck. And I wept when he announced he was resigning. I really admired him so much. And Bill Verdin was a great guy who had started in the Yankee organization, been traded for Eno Slaughter before he ever played for the Yankees, but then came back as our manager in the mid 70s. But Mr. Steinbrenner always coveted Billy Martin. And when Billy Martin got fired by the Texas Rangers, he swooped in and said, I'm making this change. So
Yeah.
that's how that all fell together. Nice
Two
lead
very,
on me too.
yeah, two very different styles, Bill Verdin and Billy Martin, one end of the spectrum to the other. Here are a couple of interesting characters. This is you in the early moments of trying to arrange the team photograph for the Yankees in 1976. We've got Sparky Lyle on the left. For some reason, he has a first baseman's mitt. And then one of the great colorful characters of 1970s baseball. We don't associate him with the Yankees, but he was there in 76 and early in 77, the great Doc Ellis.
Yeah, he won 17 or 18 games for us in 76. One of the keys to winning our first pennant since 64. So he was a great addition to the team. He came over in the trade that brought Willie Randolph too. Not a small addition. Sparky, wonderful guy. He always had laughter when he was present. What you're seeing in this picture is the first two guys to show up for the team photo, which I'm about to assemble and take that picture. So there I am in my bell bottoms. And this is the beginning of making of a team photo. So that was always a lot of fun.
And with that crew, it probably took what, 2.5, 3 hours to get everything just right?
Yeah, but you had to have patience. And then you did things that they weren't even aware of. Like if there were a couple of overweight guys, you'd put them on opposite ends of the picture. So it sort of balanced the photograph.
Interesting. Yeah. We lost Doc a number of years ago. He was a guy who really reformed himself. He had had drug problems for much of his career, then became a drug counselor. He got himself clean from both drugs, stopped drinking, really turned his life around. Sparky Lyle for years was a manager in independent minor league ball. I believe he's retired now. Have you heard from Sparky in recent years?
Yeah, we talk a lot. I did a series of interviews for the Yankees website, and he was one of the guys I interviewed for that on tape. And yeah, we always got each other. We always understood each other. And I always admired that, like a good relief pitcher, nothing could rattle him. He just had a good sense of who he was and what he could do. And when he came to the Yankees in 72, I think of it as like our second major building block. Boards. I mean, Stottlemyre and Roy White were already there. Mercer was there. But then in 70, we added Munson. And in 72, we added Lyle. And things started to fall into place for what would be those great teams of the 70s.
Well, you think of those great teams of the 70s, you think about Reggie, you think about the captain, Thurman Munson. Great photo of you in the Yankee clubhouse with Thurman. And then we see the cover of the wonderful book that Marty wrote about Thurman Munson, the definitive biography of the Yankee captain. Marty, he was beloved by teammates and fans, but sometimes struggled with the media. Why do you think that occurred?
A lot of it had to do with Horace Clarke. Horace didn't get a good press. The writers were always picking on him for, Horace was an average ball player, a hardworking lunch pail kind of ball player, was never going to go to the Hall of Fame. And the writers would just be unmerciful about how he bails out on double plays and he doesn't do this and he doesn't hit in the clutch. And Thurman would say to me and to others, Morris has a family. How could they do this to the guy? He's out there doing the best he can. He works hard every day. And he resented the writers picking on Horace.
Mhm.
And so he took that out on them by sort of shutting them down. He wasn't going to be part of that game. So as the PR guy, I mean, that didn't sit well with me. You need your players to work with the press. The press was the voice to the fans before social media came along. So it was a disappointment that he didn't have a good relationship with the press, but he didn't. When he won an MVP award in '76, which the writers vote for, I went to him and I said, how about we do a autobiography? When you win an MVP award in New York City, somebody's going to do a book about you. You're not going to make any money off it. You're going to resent everything in the book. Let's do one together.
Mm.
And his first reaction was, well, can it just be paperback so everybody can afford it? And I said, well, usually it goes to paperback later on, but libraries don't usually take it if it's just paperback. So it should start out as hardcover. So he agreed. We did the book. It was a pretty uncontroversial book. And then he died like the following year. Awful. So 30 years later, the publisher called me and said it's time for a full-scale biography, half of which, from the halfway point to the end of the book, is about the aftermath of his death and the legion of fans that followed him and stayed with him. So the first book was important because it was Thurman's voice. And this book took on an importance because it was the full story.
Obviously, you connected with him. He trusted you. It's almost like he seemed to treat you like you were one of the other players on the team.
Well, actually, one of the things I said to him was, you're not going to do this with any of the sports writers. You don't talk to any of them. I'm your best hope on this.
Yeah.
So, that was the key.
You still keep in touch with any of his family members?
Not that close because they're not big on social media and stuff. So I'll usually call Diana, his widow, around the time of the anniversary of the passing, and I'll see her at Old Timers Day. But basically, I don't see them much because they don't come to New York very often. The Munson dinner, which raises money for Association for the Help of Retarded Children, I was one of the founders of the dinner committee to select recipients each year. So that was a great honor. And in the second year, we honored James Cagney, and I got to meet James Cagney. So that was pretty cool.
You know, in some ways, Diana Munson has become kind of the new version of Mrs. Garrick or Mrs. Ruth. You always used to see the Ruth and Garrick widows at the ballpark in the 60s and 70s. And of course, then they passed on. And now you think of the great wives of baseball players, of great Yankee players. And Diana Munson's one of the first names that I think of.
Yeah, the Yankees do a great job in bringing back those, I think it's like 5 or 6 widows. Kay Mercer, Helen Hunter, Catfish Hunter's widow, Arlene Howard, Elston Howard's widow, Mercer, Munson, I may be forgetting someone, but anyway, it's great that the Yankees do that every year at Old Timers Day, and they get tremendous hands when they're introduced, needless to say, because the people identify them, of course, with those beloved players.
Another one of my favorite Marty Appel books is this one. This is when it was reissued by Diversion Books about 8-9 years ago. Now pitching for the Yankees, spinning the news for Mickey, Billy, and George. And it's really all about your day-to-day adventures doing public relations for a franchise that was almost always in the news pretty much every day in 1976, 77, and 78.
But it goes back to when I started in 68.
Right.
So we're fans of the Horace Clarke era, we could say. and then the rebuilding towards the championship years in the 70s, it's a pretty good behind the scenes look at what was going on there with the remodernization of Yankee Stadium, the move to Shea Stadium, and what was essentially becoming the Bronx Zoo years. So I get a lot of nice comments on that. The original publisher went out of business 1 month after the book came out. So it never really got the marketing and the distribution that maybe it would have gotten, not because of me, but because it was a Yankee book. So I'm glad Diversion came along to republish it and bring it back.
Yeah, this is a book. Many people, when your name comes up in the conversation, and it does from time to time, they'll say, "Yeah, I love that book he did about pitching for the Yankees. Doing their public relations. It doesn't get as much publicity as it should because of the circumstances you mentioned, but it is really enjoyable." Let's talk about your time with the commissioner, Bowie Kuhn. You worked in the commissioner's office in 1979 and 80 after leaving the Yankees. And then in 87, you come out with his biography, Hardball, The Education of a Baseball Commissioner. Tell us about your relationship with Bowie Kuhn.
Well, when he left the commissioner position, he had a lot of offers to do a memoir. And I wasn't even thinking of my own involvement. I was thinking, I hope he does a memoir. These are some turbulent years he's gone through. And of course, he lost so many battles to the Players Association and to Marvin Miller. But boy, he was there during the birth of free agency and player rights. And all these owners, Bill Veeck and Gene Autry and George Steinbrenner and Bud Selig and Gussie Busch. I mean, it was a Mount Rushmore of ownership. So he called, I had worked for him in his PR staff for a couple of years, and then he called on me to assist him on this project. Now, it was all his book, it was all his words. I didn't write anything and say, just need your approval on this. But I was the one who kept him on schedule, kept the topics coming in front of him so that we were sure to include almost everything that happened in those years. And so it was a good arrangement, his memoir, but me being the traffic cop to keep it all going. So we worked, this is the basement of his home in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and it took more than a year. So I would drive to Ridgewood, we would work all day Friday and all day Saturday, and we got it done. The book's called Hardball, The Education of a Baseball Commissioner. And whether you liked Bowie Kuhn or you didn't like Bowie Kuhn, this is an important history of the game that covers like 18 years of his time in office. So if you're a student of baseball history, this is a good book.
I had the pleasure of meeting Bowie Kuhn a number of years ago. He was donating his personal files from his time as commissioner to the Hall of Fame. And I was asked to chauffeur him from the Otesaga Hotel over to the Hall of Fame. He treated me so well. He was so much fun to talk to, and it was obvious to me that he absolutely loved the game.
Oh, yeah. He kind of came across as kind of patrician and like, not like a fan who would sit there and knock off a six-pack while enjoying a ball game. But he did love baseball, and he knew the history of baseball. And you could talk to him about Honus Wagner and Tris Speaker and Al Simmons, and he knew what you were talking about. He was part of the conversation. So I love that about him.
Yeah. Another great photograph from your collection. This is from one of the old Cracker Jack Old Timers Classics. I believe that game ran from 82 to 90. And this is a year that you're not only, well, I guess working, but you're doing something else. You're the manager of the National League team. Tell us about this.
I was on the advisory committee to pick the players. And this one year, 1990, in Buffalo, New York, Tal Smith, who was on the committee, was called to New York for an arbitration hearing. They didn't have a manager. So Dick Cecil, who was the producer, creator of this game, said, "Want to manage the National League?" And I was like, "The National League, those huckleberries? Where did I get that from?" Right? But Seaver was one of my broadcasters. I was producing the Yankee games at the time, I had hired Tom Seaver as a Yankee announcer. So this was a nice picture of the two of us in the dugout. And he talked about it for weeks when we went home and he was doing the games because we won the game 6-3. And he would say, and guess who our manager was? That dandy little executive producer, Marty Appel.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. But I got to tell you quickly, the best part of the game was Sandy Koufax was our starting pitcher. Reluctantly, he said that he only wanted to pitch to one batter. So I said, fine, that's prearranged. Dick McAuliffe was the leadoff hitter for the American League. And so McAuliffe comes up and he keeps fouling off pitches. And the pitch count is like 10. And Sandy's looking at me in the dugout like, what are we going to do here? So I go out to the mound, dressed just like in that picture. I stick out my hand and I say, Sandy, I don't like what I'm seeing here. Give me that baseball. And I call in Warren Spahn from the bullpen. And I took Sandy Koufax out. I don't think Walter Alston did that too many times. So that was a fun moment that Sandy and I still share a laugh over.
You mentioned becoming an executive producer for WPIX broadcasts of the Yankees. You won an Emmy Award for that. Here's a great photo of you at the old Comiskey Park with the scooter, Phil Rizzuto.
I think it's the new Comiskey Park.
Oh, is it the new one? Okay. This would have been what, late 80s, early 90s?
Early 90s.
Yeah.
It was the year before Camden Yards opened in Baltimore. So poor Chicago, they missed out on that era of the intimate downtown ballparks. This was like the last of the old time ballparks that was opened. But opening day might have been there and captured this photo. I loved Rizzuto. I grew up listening to him like all of us in the 50s and 60s. He started as a Yankee broadcaster in 57. And here I was as his boss in the 90s. So I love that picture.
A great guy. You know, the way he was on the air was in a lot of ways the way he was personally. He was such a friendly guy, very funny, very great at storytelling, although he could certainly go off onto tangents. But he was a guy that you had to listen to him carefully just to make sure that he was kind of staying somewhat on course, right?
Oh yeah, and Bill White, who they had a great friendship, and Bill would sometimes squeeze Rizzuto's wrist if he thought he was going to an area that he shouldn't go to. So Bill played a great role in that. And there's Bill. And one last thing on Scooter, the day he was elected to the Hall of Fame, which was a long time coming, people were lobbying for him for years, and he finally made it. And John Moore, who was our director and I was the producer, we went to his house in New Jersey because we knew he'd need some guidance and some help to get through the day with all the media requests and all the TV crews showing up. So we got him through the day, and then he and Cora went out to their favorite Italian restaurant for dinner and invited John Moore and me along. So when do you have dinner with a guy the day he goes into the Hall of Fame? That was great.
Yeah. Bill White, a figure that's somewhat forgotten in baseball. He doesn't do much in terms of interviews now. He's, I believe, now in his late 80s. Broadcast Yankee games from 1971 to 1988. Not only was he the first Black broadcaster the Yankees ever hired, really the first African-American to do play-by-play on a regular basis for any team. He was equally adept play-by-play, color announcing. And of course, he had that great on-air relationship with Rizzuto. And you were telling me that you still keep in touch with him very closely to this day.
Yeah, we talk every week or two. He's 87 now. He says he's slowing down, but I don't sense it on the phone calls. He still remembers everything. And a great man, and historic in the sense of first African-American to head a sports league when he became National League president, and first African-American play-by-play broadcaster. Jackie Robinson had done guest time in the booth when ABC briefly had a package of games in the 60s. But Bill was a full-fledged play-by-play announcer, color commentator, could do it all, worked really hard, hired at his own expense a private voice coach, and we were always talking about the next telecast and what were things we were going to have to look for in it. So he was a beloved guy to me, and I'm so glad that our friendship has endured to this day.
We have just a couple of minutes remaining with Marty Appel, and I did want to squeeze in a couple of questions from our audience. Perry Barber, who has been a guest on this program and listens to just about all the shows that we do, she writes in, I tossed Sparky Lyle multiple times when I umpired in the Atlantic League, 1998 to 2001. He, of course, managed the Somerset Patriots for more than 10 years, and they love him in New Jersey. So we thank Perry for that comment. Question from Brian Richards. Which Yankee player do you feel is the most underrated or underappreciated in franchise history?
Well, good question. It could be Willie Randolph because it was no small thing that his arrival meant suddenly a great era of Yankee success. Today, he didn't hit enough home runs to be measured today, along with the best offensive second baseman. But Willie Randolph, I think, would be the answer to the most underrated player that I witnessed and I was there for.
Oh, Willie's certainly a good choice. Tremendous second baseman and a leadoff man for many years. We have some other photos that we're just going to breeze through real quick because we're running out of time. Marty attended our Jewish baseball weekend here in Cooperstown back in '04. There were a number of former players, including Ken Holzman and Ron Bloomberg, former Yankees, that participated. I was actually covering that as a writer. That was a fun weekend back then. We mentioned the Bronx is burning. Here's a still photograph. That's Marty on the far left. No truth to the rumor that Marty supplied all the other actors with clothing for this, even though you had probably had a few of these big collared suits back then.
Well, my wife got rid of all of them. Not a problem.
Yeah. Here's a photo of the late Mel Stoudemire, probably just a few years ago. Looks like he's signing a glove for you at that
Yeah,
point.
he got me that glove. I'll just comment
Oh,
quickly.
really?
He got me that glove in 1970, and it was my gamer. Whenever I played the game, I used that glove. It wasn't even a Stoudemire glove; it was a Johnny Callison glove. But he had a contract with Spalding, and that glove. So then, at Old Timers Day a few years ago, which was I think his last one, I said, "It's time for me to retire this. Would you sign it?" And he remembered getting it for me. So, special picture.
Beautiful. And then our last photograph, a great one of you with Yogi and Ted Williams. Ted's got an expression on his face like, Marty, you owe me that money. You better pay me now. But I'm sure he was talking about something else.
Well, he was visiting the Yogi Berra Museum when the museum first opened. I did PR for the museum. It was an honor to work with Yogi on that museum project, and I treasured that friendship. And anytime you're in the presence of Ted Williams, it's an awe-inspiring moment. And I'm just standing there being awe-inspired.
Just a great photo. Two of the all-time greats. Sadly, they both left us, but great memories of Yogi Berra and Ted Williams. So many great memories that Marty Appel has provided to us. Do want to mention the fact that Marty has an ebook coming out for his wonderful Pinstripe Empire tome. The book subtitled The New York Yankees from Before the Babe to After the Boss. And this will be coming out in ebook form a little bit later this month, right, Marty?
Yeah, I was always very proud of this. The book I'm most proud of. It's the full history from 1903, at the time this came out, through 2012. Frank Graham had done the most recent narrative history before this, and that was 1943, which got updated a couple of times. So I'm proud to announce that the publisher, Bloomsbury, has agreed to update this through the 2020 season, and it'll be available as an ebook next week. So don't buy the ebook this week, because next week is through 2020, but then buy it then.
Now, ebooks you can get at Amazon.com, right?
Yeah, there's a number of places. So I'll be posting that with all the links to the different places. You can scout them to see who has the best price. But when people tell me this is the Bible of Yankee history, there's no greater compliment that I could get.
Yeah, and this is the story of the Yankees, pretty much start to current day. I mean, you go back to the days of the Highlanders with this one.
Yep. And the Highlanders played up in Washington Heights, in Upper Manhattan, and Alex Rodriguez was born in Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan. So those are the kind of things that I like to piece together to form a full story.
So lots of new material to be included in the ebook version of Pinstripe Empire. And as Marty said, coming out just 1 week from today. We want to send our very best thanks to Marty. He's been a longtime friend and supporter of the Hall of Fame. Has worked on our magazine for many, many years, always a trusted advisor, and someone who has chronicled a tremendous amount of baseball history, not just from the years that he worked, but even going as far back as the 19th century. Wrote an award-winning book about King Kelly, and has also done books on a number of other subjects, best known for his Yankee work, but it has also delved into other areas. Marty, as always, it's a pleasure for us to connect with you. We'll have to do this again.
The pleasure was mine, Bruce, and thank you to everyone who stayed with us for this program. I really appreciate your coming aboard.
Well, we thank Marty Appel. We also want to, of course, thank our sponsor, the Ford Motor Company, for making these programs possible and free to the public. We hope you enjoyed the program today with Marty Appel. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.